Good evening. You're watching the main news on HKIBC. I'm Sarah Wong. Here's a look at tonight's top stories. Daily COVID cases remain in 4 digits for the 4th day running. Ronny Tong says the pro-establishment monopoly in the Legislative Council is unhealthy. And in Shanghai, 1 person is killed as fire engulfs a petrochemical plant. The number of new COVID cases in Hong Kong has risen to a 2-month high, with infections staying above 1,000 for the 4th day in a row. Health officials discovered that in the past week, most of the patients were aged between 20 and 49. LionKwaiPhong reports.
The Center for Health Protection today reported a total of 1,276 new COVID infections, including 116 imported cases. Health officials said of the more than 7,000 cases in the past week, 54% of the patients were between 20 and 49 years old, while the elderly accounted for about 18%. This contrasted with the start of the 5th wave, when the proportion of infected elderly people was greater. An upward trend was also detected in school transmissions, with 797 cases this week, up 48% from last week. 2 more schools reported infections. 4 students came down with the illness at the Evangel College on Chixin Street in Chen Keng-o. The Greenfield English Kindergarten in Lohas Park reported that 3 students and 1 teacher contracted the virus. The schools were advised to suspend the classes which the patients attended. The police cluster added 2 more cases, taking the tally to 22. Health officials suspect that the transmission occurred during physical training sessions when masks were removed. The officers were from the operations wing, and the other 130 to 140 members of the unit tested negative. A construction site cluster in Homanting added 3 more cases, taking its tally to 10. LionKwaiPhong, HKIBC.
The head of the LionKwaiPhong group says the government has overreacted by adding an extra layer of COVID screening for bars. Alan Zeman said cases linked to bars only accounted for a small proportion of all infections.
The other day, we had over 1,000 cases in one day, and you only had 2 in bars. And so it doesn't make sense. What about the 998? Normally I don't speak out like this, but I just think it's wrong. If it goes on for longer than 2 weeks, many won't survive. I do understand the government has July 1st. They want to keep infections low. We have important people hopefully coming to Hong Kong. I understand that, but it's time to really look at where the infections are coming from.
Executive Councillor Ronny Tong says the pro-establishment monopoly in the Legislative Council is unsatisfactory. Only 1 lawmaker is outside the establishment camp, but Tong believes that an equilibrium in legislative composition will not happen in the short term. Joanna Ho reports.
Taking to the airwaves this morning, Executive Councillor Ronny Tong said the current 1-89 composition of the Legislative Council, where only 1 lawmaker is not aligned with the establishment bloc, is unhealthy. According to Tong, the central government actually wants to include more opposition voices. He said former lawmakers from the pro-democracy camp who didn't dissociate themselves from rioters during the anti-government protest in 2019 had shot themselves in the foot.
During those difficult times, the Hong Kong democratic movement appeared to be siding with people advocating for independence of Hong Kong. And that created a political environment which is not conducive to a proper dialogue being carried out between Beijing and Hong Kong's Democrats.
Tong hopes that the pendulum in LegCo's makeup will swing closer to the middle in 4 years' time. When asked if he will remain an executive councillor after John Lee takes over as Hong Kong's leader, Tong said the public will be informed in 2 days. Commenting on reports that DAB Vice Chairman Horace Cheung would become Deputy Justice Secretary, Tong said it is hard to find someone who has no political background in Hong Kong, but believes Cheung is a fair-minded and promising lawyer. Joanna Ho, HKIBC.
A woman has been sentenced to 1.5 years in jail for processing items for unlawful purposes during an anti-government protest in Yau Ma Tei in 2019. A prison van took 21-year-old Kwok Hoi-ying to the district court this morning for sentencing. A pair of pilers and lighter fuel were found in her bag when she was arrested after protesters clashed with police during the siege of Polytechnic University. Kwok was convicted of possessing tools for unlawful purposes and with intent to destroy or damage property. But she was found not guilty of rioting and using a facial covering at an unauthorized assembly. A group that campaigns for the grassroots has urged the government to improve health services for lower-income households. In particular, it called for thorough medical consultations. Kelly Peng reports.
A telephone survey has found that lower-income households are generally satisfied with public hospitals, but they feel that some areas, such as emergency services, need improvements. The Society for Community Organization, or SOCO, said elderly people are affected the most as they have to queue for a long time for a short consultation.
The elderly people I spoke to are unhappy with public health services. They said the doctors do not spend enough time listening to their health problems.
Community organizer Tim Peng said short consultations are not helpful.
For patients, if they do not have enough time to tell the doctor the symptoms and the effect of after taking the drugs or medicine, and also tell what they have or they feel after taking the medicine, maybe the doctors do not have enough information to assess the latest situation of the patients.
Elderly people with little income urge the government to increase the amount of their health care vouchers. Kelly Peng, HKIBC.
At least one person has been killed in a fire at a petrochemical plant in Shanghai. The incident came just 2 days after an explosion at another plant in Gansu province killed 6 workers. LionKwaiPhong has more.
Images captured by Shanghai residents showed the dramatic fire and explosions that roused them from their sleep at around 4 a.m. Heavy smoke poured out of the Sinopec Shanghai petrochemical plant, and the residents smelled a pungent odor. It took firefighters 5 hours to bring the blaze at the ethylene glycol plant under control. A driver was killed, while a company employee was slightly injured. The cause of the fire remains unclear, but Shanghai officials said it had no impact on what they called the surrounding water environment. The incident raised concerns over the financial hub's economic recovery as it gradually returns to normality after a 2-month lockdown forced by COVID. LionKwaiPhong, HKIBC.
Overseas, free speech advocates have denounced the British government for allowing whistleblower Julian Assange to be extradited to the United States. The WikiLeaks co-founder, who faces 18 espionage charges, has vowed to fight the decision.
Free Julian Assange! Free Julian Assange!
Supporters of Julian Assange gathered in New York to demand his release. The 50-year-old WikiLeaks co-founder faces 175 years in jail after the British government approved its extradition to the United States. Assange was indicted on 18 criminal charges after publishing classified materials in 2010 exposing U.S. military wrongdoing in Iraq and Afghanistan.
For a publisher to be extradited to the United States charged under the Espionage Act oppresses all publishers, all journalists everywhere.
Assange's wife and his legal team said the battle isn't over.
We're going to fight this. We're going to use every appeal avenue. And we're going to fight. I'm going to spend every waking hour fighting for Julian until he's free, until justice is served.
We will appeal this all the way, through the British courts and, if necessary, to the European Court of Human Rights.
The next stage of appeal is likely to be based on the right to free speech. Assange's lawyers say the U.S. case is politically motivated and that Washington allegedly plotted to assassinate him. The Australian whistleblower has been jailed in Britain since 2019 after he was forcibly evicted from the Ecuadorian embassy, where he sought refuge for 7 years. Human rights campaigners urged the Biden administration to drop the charges and called on Australia's new Prime Minister Anthony Albanese to intervene. Israel has launched air raids on the Gaza Strip after its defense system intercepted a rocket. The rocket hit the coastal city of Ashkelon in southern Israel shortly after 3 a.m. local time. Air sirens blared, sending residents running for shelter. No group has yet claimed responsibility for the attack, but Israel blamed Hamas, which controls Gaza. Israeli warplanes targeted several Hamas military posts, escalating tensions between Israel and the Palestinians. Former U.S. President Donald Trump has ridiculed his former number 2, Mike Pence. This came after a congressional panel reviewed how the former vice president withstood pressure to reject Trump's demand to overturn the presidential election results.
Mike Pence had absolutely no choice but to be a human conveyor belt. Here's a human conveyor belt. Even if the votes were fraudulent, they said he had to send the votes, couldn't do anything. I said, well, what happens when you have more votes than you had voters? Doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Nothing matters.
Trump described the Capitol riots in January last year as a simple protest that got out of hand and blasted the House committee as a disgrace and a one-sided witch hunt. The former president was accused of masterminding a coup to stay in power by peddling fraudulent claims of voter fraud. Trump, who is pondering a third presidential run in 2024, has been doubling down on the groundless accusations to galvanize his supporters. Tourists in Brazil now have the chance to see an iconic monkey species that is in danger of extinction as the Amazon rainforest itself shrinks.
The first time I've seen the monkey in the wild, I've seen it in the zoo, and I think it's always great when you actually see a species in its natural habitat rather than behind bars.
The golden lion tamarins are small orange primates, but they're threatened by deforestation. In a bid to raise awareness, a conservation group is encouraging tourists to see the rare monkeys up close. The monkey's natural home, the Amazon, is also in danger as illegal logging and farming reduce the size of the forest, which is vital for the global environment. On to the weather now. There will be sunny intervals and a few showers tomorrow with isolated thunderstorms in the morning. Temperatures range between 27 and 31 degrees. Monday and Tuesday will be sunny and sometimes rainy. Now let's take a look at the weather around the world. That's our main news for Saturday night. Join us for more updates at 11. I'm Sarah Wong. Thanks for watching. Stay safe and take care.